string on your finger and tie it with a belt.
Recording
That's
in
how you do
progress. Good morning, ladies and
it. Oh, the
gentlemen.
bracelets. Jangle your bracelets.
Yeah, I actually had my bracelet where it would supposedly remind, I guess it did. It's reminded me. And I always have to take it off. I have to disarm myself to limit the thumping, although it doesn't completely solve it. All right. So, welcome. This is class 6 of Belonging to Each Other and the Planet. And today I'm going to focus on the brain, the human brain, and the structure, function, evolution, and the care and feeding of the human brain. And at the end of this, what I'd like to do for the interactive part, but I'll give you a heads up now, so as we talk about it, it's going to talk about how different parts of our brain function and relate with each other, and how to have a healthy relationship between the parts. And so I'd be interested afterwards, if people feel like it, sharing some time when there was a conflict or a discussion between some part of you, say your executive function and your heart, for example, your decision maker in your heart, and how that conversation went, and how what that experience was like for you. Um, okay. So the context again for this is the overall structure of the class, which is concentric circles representing the narcissistic paradigm and the need to transition to a paradigm of communion, and that each of those concentric circles represents a sphere of our experience. And the basic idea is that in each of those spheres, we're faced with the same challenge, namely to make that transition. And again, the dominant metaphors of the narcissistic system are power, competition, control, conflict, hierarchy, separateness. Essentially, it's about individualism, dominance, but essentially it's about dominance. And the dominant metaphors of the uh, a paradigm of communion are relatedness, cooperation, integration, communication, conversation, chorus, tapestry, holism. So how does that play out in the various parts of our brain, and how our society encourages us to use and employ the various parts of our brain? Now, since the system, the paradigm of narcissism, namely our dominant culture, celebrates and brings forth the narcissistic potentials of its citizens, and sort of starves our needs for membership and belonging. And one of the ways it does that, and you might expect that, is that when it talks about the human brain and the human being, it celebrates and elevates those aspects of us that make us different from and separate us from the rest of the animal kingdom and the rest of creation. The things that make us special and different and supposedly better, those will be celebrated and brought forth. And that will be done, and the narcissistic system will want those aspects of ourselves that are peculiarly human, including our rational function. Um, so it's in love with our new tool, our new toy, our new tool that's just we have, which is which is the youngest part of the brain, namely the neocortex, and particularly the prefrontal, the prefrontal neocortex, which has our most specializedly human functions. So it loves our new toys, and it wants that new tool to dominate and rule over the rest of our being. He wants our executive function or our rational function. He wants us to rule over the anciently involved attributes of. I'm gonna put my glasses on so I can see my notes a little better. The anciently evolved attributes and instinctual wisdoms that have been built into us through our evolutionary journey. And the narcissistic view tends to despise our animal selves and want us to dominate over them. But our pre-human parts are the reservoir of all of our genetically coded experiences and heritage, and they include all the wisdoms and all the positive adaptations of that heritage. In short, it's not only our newfangled human brain that has wisdom and is smart, it's our animal body and our animal emotions and our animal spirit and our animal selves. And those qualities, among those qualities, are that got us here and that earned us our niche at the table of life, are part of our adaptive heritage from our pre-human experience, from a single cell to an algae to where we are now. And that includes the pro-social adaptive instincts that are an important part of how we got to where we are and how we got to have such a dominant, for better or worse, dominant role in distribution, geographic distribution in the world. And that's the one, and this is this little catechism that I came up with. I'm saying those pro-social instincts, I summarize those as a deep instinctual desire to be an empowered, respected, and contributing member of a meaningful whole, worthy of our allegiance, and ultimately sacred. So all the instincts that would guide us towards that lie in much deeper levels, also lie in much deeper levels of our being. So if the neocortex is the seat of our modern human executive function and of our uniquely human consciousness, then you could see that as a rider on a horse, that's the rider, and the body, the emotions and the physical body, the animal part are the horse. And which brings us to the question of the fact that a good rider listens to the horse. A good rider may say, we're going to that next town over there, but they're going to listen to the horse saying, no, this ground isn't good to walk on here, or wait a minute, I smell or hear danger, or I'm hungry and I'm about to collapse, and we'll listen to that. And I said that once to someone who is an experienced rider and was actually working with at-risk kids on doing therapy that involved riding horses. And she said, the metaphor we use is that a really good rider is a centaur. The goal of being a rider is to be a centaur, where essentially the rider and the horse become one. So that would be a nice model, nice metaphor for a healthy relationship of our conscious executive function for the rest of our being. By analogy, that would mean, so in the narcissistic culture, the executive function is essentially an authoritarian leader who is the boss, who is in leadership for their own benefit, and who uses the people to either enrich or glorify themselves. So that would be the narcissistic model of what an executive function would be, essentially a bully and an authoritarian leader, as opposed to a servant leader, a democratic servant leader, whose job is to serve and to listen to and care for and do their best to meet the needs of the people. So that, all right. So from there, let's look at some of the parts of the brain and see what a healthy relationship of the parts would be. What would be a healthy relationship between the parts that serves the whole? Now, one of the books on the reading list is a really cool book by Dan Siegel, who is, what's particularly cool about him is that um, he is both a brain scientist and a practicing therapist. Hi, Sean. And I took my bracelet off, Sean.
You're cute. I'm actually driving, so I'm going to stay on mute and video off, but I'm here.
Okay. Um, so his one of the a cool there's and he has if you look him up, Dan Siegel, he has the book that's on the list, but he also has some videos in which he shows it. So he talks about the fist. I'm gonna I'm gonna pin myself here while I'm talking so that I can see me better, and I guess your screen, you are in charge of your own screens. But so he calls it the fist model of the brain. And what he says is if this is the body, the part of the brain he actually draws it in a profile that I can't quite twist my hand to do it. Like, well, maybe I can't. So then the brain stem is so the brain was built evolutionarily from the bottom up. And the bottom part closest to the body, the rest of the body, the brain stem. And that is sometimes referred to as the reptilian part of the brain. These are all broad oversimplifications, but I think it's a useful way to look at it. So the brainstem basically regulates the basic functions of life: the heartbeat, the energy level, the arousal level, keeps everything going, and that happens unconsciously because thank God we don't have to say, "Wait a minute, I forgot to tell my heart to beat. I got distracted." So those things are unautomatic in there's whole systems that take care of those basic life functionings, and those are primarily in terms of the brain, those are controlled from the brain stem. The next part is the thumb, and he says the thumb can represent the limbic region of the brain. That's about 200 million years old. It's much newer, and it can be called the mammalian part of the brain. Like, so there would be reptiles, mammals, the mammalian type part of the brain, and it's called, which is the limbic system, and it is the place. So mammals, right, raise their offspring and raise them and so they require attachment and child rearing and love and caring and connection. But attachment is the sort of the technical word for that. And but so attachment is also where you have love, where you have sacrifice, where you have nurture. And that's the emotional center of the brain. And that is here. That's the emotional center. And it's tucked in and protected by the cerebral cortex. So that's the newest part, the cerebral cortex. And the most specialized newest part is the prefrontal cortex, called the PFC. Often the prefrontal cortex, which is, and that would be just the first knuckles here, which is peculiarly human, and the middle parts, especially middle portion. So, okay, so we've got bodily functions, the emotions, including attachment, the mammal part, and then the more modern part over it. So now, so we're talking about and what I like about this is you can see that the newer part builds on it, but the newer part is also protective of. So if that includes the executive function, it's an executive function which is protective of and needs to care for the emotional core. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the most peculiarly human part, and it includes our ability to self-reflect, to self-witness, to self-regulate, our capacity for overview. It has the capacity to override comfort and integrate some of our, for instance, our fears. We'll talk about that in a minute. Like if there's emotional fear here, this part can say, it's okay that you just heard a loud noise, and the last time you heard a loud noise, something terrible happened. But this time I've checked it out. It's okay. It's just a noise. It's just a bus going by. So it can integrate the stress and the fear. It can integrate all of the emotions, but including stress and fear. That I don't know if I did. I think I didn't talk enough about the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the emotional brain of the limbic system. It's really actually right at the cusp of the brainstem and the limbic system, and it's the part where fight, that the alarm system. It's the part that goes like whoops, and that needs to make quick judgments, and where the fight, flight, freeze, or go dormant response is. So the prefrontal cortex is kind of the gift, the glory, and the experiment of human consciousness. It's connected to all parts of the brain. It connects, it coordinates, it integrates. It's especially cued to social aspects of life, and it maps the connections of the world. And it has our ability to reflect on ourselves, thus to learn and moderate our behavior. And we talked about this before, to imagine a future of our own imagining, and thus and to do actions built towards building those future, and thus to have a unprecedented ability to co-create and create the world and shape the world in our own desires or image. It also has the part of us that can attune to others, empathy, to modulate our responses, and to grow and learn, and therefore to build culture. So our brain has to help us to live in a world that both nurtures and sustains us, and is dangerous and can kill us, and ultimately will reabsorb us. To a world that gives us and nurtures our life, and threatens it and ultimately takes it away, our individual lives. And our mammalian limbic system, that's the thumb here, is the seat of our emotional life. And the word emotion comes from moving, as to moving towards or moving away. So it's the most fundamental judgment there is good or bad, safe or not good, joyous or scary. So that's the place, the emotional place is where the basic decisions are made of what's good and bad. Not on some highfalutin moral level, but when I touch something hot, it hurts. When my mother gives me the breast, that's good. When someone looks at me and laughs and plays with me, that's good. When someone stares at me in a cold and frightening way, that's bad. That's the most fundamental place where decisions of what's good and bad happens. And we have evolved systems to deal with both aspects of the world, its danger and its nurturance and beauty. And so I'm going to break that down. So we have an alarm system that's there to deal with things that are bad and dangerous, and an affiliative system or a social engagement system or an emotional engagement system, whatever you want to call it. I'll use an affiliative system to deal with the things that are good and give us pleasure and are desirable. So I'm going to start with the alarm system. The key to the alarm system is the amygdala at the base of the limbic part. And that's where fight, flight, freeze, or collapse are. And just to go through those, my options in danger are to fight if I can, to run if I can't get away, to freeze, and at worst to just collapse. So if I'm being eaten, I give up. And so that's a whole range of responses to things that are dangerous. And because it's an alarm system, it goes directly, it bypasses other parts and goes directly to our autonomous nervous system, which is what controls our heartbeat, whether we sweat, whether we run, whether we get up the energy to run, to our autonomous nervous system, and to our pituitary glands, where it produces cortisol and adrenaline, which are the stress hormones, which are the hormones that get us jacked up to deal with an emergency. So it essentially goes emergency. And in doing that, it bypasses. I'm wondering how much detail here. It bypasses the thalamus. You don't need all this detail, but it bypasses the thalamus, which is the original place where a decision gets made whether the input needs to go to the prefrontal cortex to be considered, or whether it better go straight to the amygdala. So that's the initial intake that decides whether this is an emergency that needs to go to the amygdala. But once the amygdala is startled, the thalamus is offline. And the hippocampus, which is sort of the storyteller, these are all still parts of the limbic system. The hippocampus, which is the storyteller, which relates the experience to the past, situates it in context, gives it context of meaning, like that's a loud noise. Sometimes loud noises are really dangerous. Sometimes they're not. Last time I heard this kind of loud noise, it wasn't so bad. So all the things that would moderate the response are offline. And of course, the prefrontal cortex is offline. And the reason for that is that, let's say you're at war and you hear a shot. You don't have time to go like, gee, that was a loud noise. I think that was a shot. For all I know, that shot's aimed at me. That could be a bullet coming at me right now. If that bullet hit me, boy, that would be terrible. I think I'm going to duck. Okay? So there's no time for that. The amygdala's job is to say duck and to bypass all the more complicated systems that help us understand, give meaning to, and situate the experience. Which, by the way, so yeah, which is why PTSD is when you are stuck in alarm. That's no longer, so that alarm system is incredibly important and wonderful, and you want to duck when you hear when the bullet's coming, or run, or do whatever you need to do to save yourself. But when your PTSD is when you're stuck in it and the alarm goes off inappropriately. And you're probably not stuck in it all the time, but when you're triggered, you respond as though you were in grave danger when you're really not. And the part of you that would say, you know what, it's okay. Here's an example. I had a client once who was in Vietnam, and a Vietnamese child brought a bomb to some of his fellow soldiers and left, and it blew up and they died. And so he's tremendously triggered by a supposedly innocent looking child. And this guy was a recluse. He said, I can't go out because if some kid pulls at the back of my shirt, I might kill it. I don't know that I won't kill it. So I'm just not fit for human to be out in the world, because whatever part of him would say, hey, just because a child is showing up or pulling on your shirt or trying to get your attention, just be aware that that's just, blah, blah. Because when he's triggered, he's right back where he was, because that traumatic experience is a standalone experience. It hasn't been recorded or integrated or situated in the story or the meaning of the person's life. It has not been integrated in that way, which is why the treatment, there's been a lot of efforts to have sort of cognitive treatment of PTSD, and they've been not very successful, basically because it's the limbic system is where the trauma lives. So just getting this system to say, oh, this is how you think, this is how you should behave, doesn't do it. What you need to do in that kind of therapy is to experience, to touch and heal the emotional scar. But you can't do that by just exposing the person to the emotion, because the emotion, that's why they can't, the emotion is too dangerous. So you need to find a way where they get to visit and experience and remember their experience while being held in the consciousness of the PFC, while the conscious brain is providing the comfort and the safety to enable them to get as close to that experience as they can. And then that has to be carefully titrated. And of course, the job of the therapist is to create a safe container so that the person can have a safe container for their terrifying emotions. All right. So now we're going to talk about the affiliative system. Okay. The affiliative system is like social engagement, emotional engagement. It's the mammalian part of the brain. And because mammals give birth to their children and have to, and they're not ready for life yet, they have to be raised and trained and nurtured. That's the place where lives our profound instinct for attachment, for attunement, for love, for membership. And that system on the individual level is built on the love and attachment that the person experiences in development. And we talked about that if you didn't get a sense of safety in how you developed, then you have to work really hard to regain that. And the affiliative system also involves a reward system, which rewards adaptive behaviors by making them feel good, which a reward system that makes us feel good when we do things that have shown to be adaptive, like have attachment, have attunement, have friendship, have community, have membership, have connection. And it rewards us with dopamine, which is makes you feel good, with serotonin, which is a mood smoother, and with oxytocin, which is the hormone that governs attachment. Important part of the affiliative system is mirror neurons, and which is sort of the basis of our ability to be empathic. And how they discovered them was when they started doing brain scans, they realized that when someone is watching someone do something, the same part of their brain fires up that would if they were doing it themselves. So you watch a mother feeding a child, and the same part of the brain, I guess, especially if you're a woman, you see nurturing, and the same part of your brain that would happen if you were engaged in nurturing fires. Or someone throws a ball. That's why I think we enjoy sports. Someone throws a ball, and the same part of us brain that would, if we were throwing the ball, fire. So it's the core of the ability to have empathy, literally have empathy, because you experience in yourself some level of what you're seeing the other person experience. There's a really cool studies, one of which is one where there's a 2.5-year-old, and the experimenter comes in and piles up books. He puts up one book, and then purposely drops the other book, falls off. And the 2.5-year-old reaches for the book that fell off and puts it on top, because they identified from watching with the intention of the action and knew what the guy wanted to do and helped it happen. And I'm going to send you a link to it. There's a very cool, if you look up mirror neurons, there's some very cool TED Talks about them. One by an Indian man whose name I don't remember. I don't know if I think he's American, but he has an Indian heritage and an Indian name. So the prefrontal cortex job is to oversee and integrate the alarm system and the affiliative system, and to take care of the interests of the whole being, which means to connect and coordinate and integrate, to reflect on the self and the world, to learn and modulate behavior, to imagine a future, and to create a new world. Is this a good time for me to check if people have something they want to say or ask or add? Or I'll go on happily, but could all, yeah.
Oh, okay, one other aspect that you haven't mentioned yet is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system responses.
Do you want to tell us that part?
No, I wanted to know if you could.
All right, so the names are always the opposite of what they seem like, right? The sympathetic one is the alarm, part of the alarm system, and the parasympathetic is part of the pleasure, goodness, connection system. And so one of the things so when there's alarm, when I said it goes straight to the autonomic nervous system from the amygdala, that goes to the sympathetic, namely the alarm part of that system. And the when you cuddle someone you love, that involves the parasympathetic, and that's the autonomous part of the nervous system, and that resides in the brain stem, in the brain stem, the part that's closest to the body, the rest of the body.
Just a quick comment, Bob. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm
hear you fine.
I think. Okay, great. I think that in your comment about PTSD and using cognitive behavioral therapy versus reintroduction to the trauma, I'm pretty sure what you were saying, that it was actually the combination of both. Cognitive behavioral therapy, just looking at cognitive distortions and grounding and all those things, are effective. But to really be able to address the trauma, you need to do both. Give them the skills so they can look at and manage the skills in the present moment, understand how the trauma has affected their vision and assumptions about the world. And then as they've gained the skills, they're also doing the reintroduction of the trauma. So you're putting them together. It's not an either or situation. Is that probably an accurate way
Yeah,
of looking at it?
I agree with that. So the book by Van der Kolk that's on the list, who's my favorite, I mean, I think he is generally considered the expert, but anyway, he's certainly my favorite expert on PTSD. And he says those are important, but those are only important in terms of creating the safe. There was a lot of hope that just learning those tools would do it. And he's saying,
Right.
if you don't provide the person, the problem is that when the person is triggered into their trauma, those tools just aren't available. It doesn't mean they're not useful tools for living, or that you can't, when you get out of the trauma, you can't try to apply them. But if you're only working on the cognitive level, it doesn't really reach. It's not limbic therapy, which is to say, it doesn't help you be able to tolerate the emotions. That doesn't mean you should be brutal. You should just be exposed to the emotions, but that has to be titrated. But the trick is to gradually expose people to those emotions with everything online, with their PFC and their full consciousness online, and their ability to self-nurture and to balance the experience and to put it into a story and to put it into a context. When that's online, then you support that, then you're creating the safety for the person to integrate the limbic wound. And I think some cognitive therapy would like the convenience of just being able to teach a bunch of tools and not have to help people with that, really, with the deeper process. And I think that's very limited. So I guess I'm mostly agreeing with what you said, I think, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think one of the challenges, and this is probably not necessary for this class, but one of the challenges that you end up getting all these people that want to go into abreacting and, pound pillows, do all that stuff, and or do the wave
Absolutely.
in front of the eye without any understanding that your trauma has developed, has changed your view of the world, your assumptions about the world, and helping you to then look at both of those so that you're healing on both ways. So it's
that's good.
And I think about, from us, I think about the world we are in right now, that we've got a lot of people that have been particularly have grief and loss around COVID and around politics and trauma around that, and living with a heightened awareness of anxiety in that system where they're reacting, and beginning to understand how to get out of that is going to be a real key thing for us to have healthy connections in society. So anyways, that's my 2 minutes.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. And certainly it is not okay to simply confront people with their, throw people into their trauma and, without the structure, helping them with the structure necessary. What you're trying to promote is people being in a position where they can contain. They have a container for their trauma. So, and the goal, one way people talk about the goal is you want people to be able to feel and deal. You want people to be able to feel what ultimately you want to be able to feel and function, and not to just function over the trauma, by blotting it out and until it catches you from behind, or just be emotionally reactive without any kind of containment for that.
They're doing a lot of looking now at what adverse childhood events are doing before the child is even got the cognitive ability to look at it. And those adverse childhood events are particularly difficult to reach, but they are certainly color that whole individual's view of the world. And I think it's very important to realize, and I feel so sad about what's happening in Ukraine to all those children that are experiencing those adverse events, and what that impact is going to be later in life. It's really interesting, also sad to think about that. There's a really interesting book called What Happened to You? And it's a cognitive neuroscientist, and Oprah Winfrey. She talks about her own personal experiences in that book. And at the same time, he talks about how the brain is processing various events. Very interesting and good book to read about trauma that happens to very young children. And it also points out that we really have to be paying a lot more attention to those years before children really can verbalize the traumas that happen to them.
Right.
Very,
I'd
very
like to add,
interesting
I'd
book.
like to add to that where I watched Gabor Mate's movie again, and that's exactly what he's talking about. To find the traumas, to see them and to feel them before you can really do much about them. And it's starting in childhood.
Okay. All
I
right.
like it very much.
Right. If I move on from this, that's all great. And oh, I'm going to pin myself now if I can. Remove the pin. Pin. There we go. All right. So nature's daring experiment is whether a creature with a uniquely human consciousness, with particularly as represented by our PFC, can a creature with so much power to imagine, to set goals, to do goal-oriented behavior, and thus to co-create the world, can a creature with human consciousness, with the powers of our PFC, can such a creature, can we be capable, is it compatible? Are we compatible? Can we be compatible with the thriving of the whole? And when I say that, I think of there's this quote from the Lincoln Gettysburg Address. It is for us, the living, to decide whether a government, he's talking about something else, but the government he's talking about democracy. It is for us, the living, to decide whether a government so constituted by the people, for the people, by the people, for the people, and of the people, can thrive or perish from the earth. So whether a creature so constituted can thrive or must perish from the earth. And that takes us back to the question of the relationship of our PFC to the ancient parts of ourselves, the ancient parts of our brain. And back to the question of whether our rational function is a dictator or a servant of the whole. And the reason for that is that rationality, isolated from the heart and the body, rationality untethered from the heart and the body, can do great harm and is what makes us potentially dangerous and destructive. So the planning and the goal setting and the executive function, the calculating capacity, does not, this is important, and does not, it does, okay, rationality detached from the heart has no morality. It is amoral. The calculating capacity, our calculating capacity, untethered to and not in service of the heart and the body, is amoral. Rationality detached from the heart has no. You cannot. The point is, you cannot deduce morality. And there's endless philosophical efforts to do that, but you can't. And that's because the calculating function is instrumental. So if you give me a goal and say you want to figure out how to get there as quick as you can, I can use my calculating function to figure out that. But whether the goal where you're telling me to go is a good goal, the calculating function does not have, it can tell you how to get there and can't tell you where to go. And because the values have to come from the heart. And the classic example of that, of course, is Eichmann. And people probably know about the book by Hannah Arendt called The Banality of Evil. And what she talks about is that all it takes to do horrendous. So turns out Eichmann was not a dedicated Nazi on some level, and he had no personal hatred of Jews, apparently. He was just, quotes, as he said, following orders. So his technical job was to get as many Jews to the gas chambers as he could, as efficiently as he could, and he took that on, and he took no responsibility for the goal, for the orders, for whether this was good or a right thing to do. So all it takes is to dissociate our rational function from whatever keeps us decent, from our heart and our body. I mean, the heart and the body should be rebelling loudly at the. Someone says to me, "Hey, why don't you, go cut someone's head off?" My heart and my body will have a very strong reaction, and hopefully I will listen to them. So healthy executive function has to serve the values of the heart, operate in partnership with the heart, listen to the needs and the inputs of the limbic system, the heart, and the body, the brainstem. It has to use its function. Yeah.
Could you reframe that? Because I have using the heart as a descriptive for our value systems that we have built over time doesn't work for me. And I'm presuming you're not saying that our values are actually based in our left and right ventricle. So could you use a different terminology for that so I can understand how you view that?
Well, how about if I just say our limbic system, our emotional system, the system that makes that chooses values?
Well, I think our emotions are a really dangerous thing for us to be able to use as the indicator, except when you get down to the brainstem stuff where it's fight, flight, the reptilian brain. I think you described it. But I think there's a whole issue of how, as a society, we create values and assumptions about the world from the very time we're children, and those assumptions are left in place unless they're taken out and examined. And if it is not, some of them are reptilian, certainly. Some of them are things that we've picked up along the way that the values re-examined can or not re-examined can be really dangerous, and re-examined can. So I don't think it's just a physical thing. I think some of it is that we are not re-examining what we believe to be accurate too, like about blacks or about I'm better than somebody else. Those are a value system that is really not necessarily a physical thing. It is something that we have been indoctrinated throughout our lives.
Well, so that's right. What you just said is right. But so I guess this is a crude simplification, of course, but when I say heart, I mean our true emotional core, and that includes the whole affiliative system of love and attachment and belonging and being part of. So that's two reactions. One, so I don't mean by that anybody says, "Oh, I love America," or "I love the flag," or I what I would consider sort of learned ideological affections. I personally love the Warriors and the 49ers, and I don't know if that's deep in my soul or my limbic system, but the other part is I'm not actually advocating that the limbic system be in charge by itself. I'm saying that the executive function needs to be in communication with. So our executive function, or whatever you want to call it, is there's a dialogue going on, and in which some of our emotional responses are modulated and tested and learned and held and comforted, including let's say unhealthy attachment. Let's say someone who finds themselves falling for and becoming attached in a way where they give up their own, give themselves up essentially, and are not in a healthy relationship. So in that case, something between, so that there'd be limbic reasons for that attachment, but you would want the prefrontal cortex to get involved in that conversation and say, look, this is not working out. And do you notice that this keeps happening? It keeps not working out. And I wonder what's going on. And let's talk to your heart and see why your heart does this. So I don't know if that's...
That helps. Thanks.
Yeah, one of the things that has been central to me as an educator in higher education, I was professor most of my career, is the idea for me of three-centered learning. And that is that you have to engage all three centers. And I call them part of the triune brain. So you cannot just engage one, just the intellectual side and feel that will stay with you. And you can't just engage the emotional. You must engage both. And then that has to spill over into some kind of action so that you have a three-centered learning process that goes on. And that's a real challenge. But I also have found that that's very helpful. Once upon a time when I was single, I was able to look at some of the relationships I had and say, gee, they were primarily, in this one sphere, but not another. And it occurred to me that for a like partner, I had to have all three spheres engaged. And that really helped me figure out what
So cool.
relationships had some potential and which ones were what they were, but limited. So I actually
Very cool.
got what I wanted.
Thank you, Karen, for that. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. So again, remember the paradigm of communion, if applied to this, would be that what you want is an integration and a communication and a conversation and a partnership between the various parts. I do think that there can be leadership, but the leadership sure has, if you want to call the prefrontal cortex being in some form of executive function or leadership, it has to be in an intimate, supportive relationship and listening relationship with the other parts. So, okay. So let me get myself pinned here. I thought I was pinned. One moment. Close that. Remove pin. Pin. There we go. So the PFC's job is to integrate and to hold a balance between the alarm system and the affiliative system. And as we've sort of been saying all along, those are both parts of belonging. Taking care of and defending and protecting yourself and knowing when there's danger and reacting to it in an appropriate way, and experiencing one's belonging and one's connection and one's love and interdependence with others is, and mutual nurturing with others is another part of belonging. And so which system is activated is modulated a lot by culture. And in the narcissistic system, and we'll look at that. That includes the economic system and the political system, etc. There's a lot of fear and alarm and competition, and everyone for himself, and it brings forth the fight, flight,
Mhm.
freeze, or collapse response, and it divides us from each other and serves entrenched power and privilege. So if we want to facilitate communion, which would be a system in which we would want to create a system in which people feel as safe as possible and empowered enough to feel safe and empowered enough to bring out the beautiful potentials of our nature. And that involves essentially a healing, and people have referred to this already, a healing of the collective or social PTSD by enveloping it in a nurturing, comforting, inclusive protection in the protection of a supportive, connected, and loving whole. In a system which allows us to feel that we are a meaningful part of a meaningful whole. And I wrote something here which I think speaks to what Sean said. So I'm talking, so, there's a lot of work now on collective PTSD, and I think that's really important. And the collective PTSD, my God, if you start looking at it, the levels on which that works, and the amount of trauma that history has put on people, and how much of the the warlike behavior of people almost always is because they feel like they've been done to, and they're in great danger and they have to protect themselves, and maybe it's their turn now to be the winner and the oppressor. Give me a sec till I have to check this here. So I think so I'm back to the feel and deal, right? The part of the healing is you want the person, you don't want to just kill the emotions so that you can manage your life and try to hope that your trauma doesn't come up. And you don't want to be flooded by your trauma in a way where you're constantly reactive and in some emotional state where you can't cope. So you're looking for some balance for that, and how you find that is a place where in the brain that would be a relationship. In the brain that would be a relationship where your emotions are intact, but you have a strong enough structure to contain them, comfort them, handle them, and make sense of them. And in society, it would be having a society in which we're not constantly triggered to be desperately defending ourselves in a lonesome way against what seem to be powerful external forces that we don't have any control over. And that's the end of my talk, and we got 20 minutes left. We have, more than 20 minutes left.
So much of this is evident in society right now. If you look at the various tribes that have divided the country right now, but you can also see it in the war on Ukraine and propaganda, the whole idea of propaganda that feeds a particular fear that people might have or creates it, like we see in, what state was it? Youngkin got elected because he said the parents, your kids are being fed all kinds of fear-based things that, parents should be in charge of, but there's a lot of manipulation of fear right now in so much of what we see going on. Now we have the whole Roe v. Wade controversy, which is another one that is very, very strong, emotional, one way or the other. And it's really quite interesting how bathed we are in our society via propaganda of various sorts.
Imagine being a Russian, in the wake of the Nazi, of the Nazi effort to destroy you, and having won that at unbelievable cost. And now you're told that that a bunch of Nazis, a bunch of neighboring Nazis are trying to make you unsafe. So imagine how vulnerable you are. I mean, that's propaganda, but how vulnerable you are to that propaganda based on the trauma you've gone through. I always think of, now this is there's some politics in the statement that people may disagree with, but I think that a lot of the bellicose behavior of the right-wing Israeli government, that's from the trauma of what happened to Jews. And and never again, right? So most of us, when horrible things happen, say something like never again. And we're going to damn well be sure that never happens again, and may not notice the point at which we've just become the oppressor or aggressor in the process.
One of the things that I heard about Putin was that, he was in Stalingrad, or, his family was in Stalingrad when it was under siege by the Nazis, and that his brother actually was killed during that process. And I wonder how much that really has crept into his psyche as he talks about Nazis, because to him it's believable. I don't know. It's very interesting. How much does he really believe what he's saying or not?
Do people want to try? Sorry.
A lot of people.
Right. Do people want to try this thing about sharing some stage in your life where there was a struggle between you call it your executive function and your emotions, or whatever you want to call it, and how that played out, or what, is that how that kind of internal conflict, how you dealt with it, or how it affected you, or?
I could talk about the fact that I grew up with a Russian refugee mother and grandmother and was called Dirty Commie all through high school in Los Angeles. How much it hurt me. And I think that Russians today who are fighting in Ukraine are totally desensitized. And there's really nothing on the American news about the fact that about 30,000 Russian brainwashed soldiers have been killed. I cry a lot about the war.
30,000. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And we actually hear that from the other side. We actually hear that from the other side, which is practically crowing about it. Right. That's going to teach.
It's all tragic. It's all tragic.
Yeah.
Well, in World War II, 24 million Russians died in World War II. And Stalin executed my grandfather. Yeah.
What was your grandfather? Tell us about that if you want.
He was very educated. He was a chemist and a photographer. Stalin wanted to get rid of all the educated, all the aristocratic people, and So he killed my grandfather, great-grandfather, great-uncles, all the men in the family. So my uncle would have been killed if they had remained there. My Uncle Nicholas.
Wow.
Bob, could you repeat your question again?
Well,
Of what you want to
I mean, the conversation can go wherever it wants to go, but what I had thought about was, since I was talking about how the different parts of our brain can operate in a cooperative consultation with each other, and how they can be experienced as just, we can experience them as a conflict. So I was wondering if people were interested in sharing some turning point or important moment in their life where they really had that experience of this is what I should do, this is what I want to do, or whatever shape that would take. An internal debate, and how do we deal with that? And again, as that being a metaphor or a model for external debates.
Mhm.
I think meditation and yoga do help integrate all
Mm-hmm.
brain parts.
Yeah, I use something else, energy tapping, that
Yes.
Oh yeah.
accesses various acupressure points. And there's a person who really, if you want to look him up on YouTube, I don't know that he's got anything anymore. His name is Gary Craig. And he developed emotional freedom technique with these tapping processes
This.
that really over tap the, that get supposedly get some of the other systems involved. And I found it to be, and that whole thing is very fascinating to me as to how and why it works.
Mhm.
But you can look it up probably on YouTube. I'm not sure. He used to have a lot and he's retired. I don't even know if he's alive anymore.
Mhm.
But he did it all for free. I think he made his money some other way. He was not a therapist. But a lot of people were very, very interested in his approach.
It's called EMF, isn't it? EMF. I get emails about it.
No.
No, I'm going to jump in a minute because I'm having a hard time hearing, but I'm wondering, I'm real curious about how Borg reflects on this, because being someone who's a very strong pacifist, was there a turning point in your life, or were there some touch points in your life where you had that dual conflict you looked at?
Yes, I was just about to enter the conversation.
All right.
Thank you, Sean. I have worked through through high school and then at the end of a marriage, through some, I'm not sure if trauma is the right word, but I suppose it could be used, particularly at the end of the marriage, by turning to music and art.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And the art in particular, I think the music, I was so in love with it that it gave me a place to go, a place to be. And the art, I think, was particularly effective because it was art quilting and improvisational. The designing was all of my own. It was like painting a picture rather than doing blocks, and became more and more abstract. And strangely, when I came up with the vision of a design, I was completely unaware of what my body and heart were saying until even 5-10 years later, when I looked at it and said, oh, And I guess I had gained the space of perspective needed to understand what I was working through in my art, but it was just happening. And
Beautiful.
has really brought me to another level, you know, than from where I was at the end of each of those traumatic periods.
I'm
Did-
really identifying with what you're saying. I became a mural artist in Oakland in '82, and it saved my life.
Mm.
Really saved my life. To paint huge paintings.
Did anyone, I proposed some homework last time, Matt. Did anyone try that? Were you sort of sensing in and then seeing if there was a movement that would come of that? Because that would be another place where, that's just what reminded me when you talked about the mural, you know, where what's guiding what's happening is not my idea. Gee, would it be interesting if I raised my left hand and maybe that would look ugly or graceful or beautiful or whatever I imagined it was.
Mhm.
But letting it happen, and then in part in letting it happen, so like you could say that comes from some deep unconscious place, something can come to consciousness, you know. For instance, let's say I start making fists and I go like, whoa, I didn't realize I was angry, but seems, you know, whatever it is, so that you get, if you allow yourself to access the unconscious part, then it can come up, and then your more conscious part may or may not make something of it. That was interesting. Like your example was interesting. I think you said it was years later that you went, oh.
You know, painting a 300-foot by 60-foot mural,
My God.
mainly 4 of us, you use your whole body. And I
Yeah.
began to paint with both hands at the same time, big star galaxies.
That's interesting to me because my quilts are large.
Yeah.
And I drew them out first on a large piece of paper that covered the whole wall and used all this body movement, but I never thought of it that way. It may have been, you know, more internal movement than I realized, rather than just doing the drawing, doing the
Yeah.
design.
So there's the idea, and there's that, and then there's this whole thing that happens in between, which is done with your body. Yeah. Yeah.
When I was going through my divorce, it was a fairly traumatic time, but I was in Gestalt therapy training.
Mm.
And one of the things about Gestalt therapy is that the therapist will notice any little movement that you make and say, give that part of yourself a voice. What's it saying? And boy, that was really helpful to do that kind of integration. It wasn't just stuff from your head, it was stuff from your body as well.
So that's beautiful. So right there it is. It's not just, oh, do this unconscious thing, but let it become conscious and let your conscious speak for it or with it. I mean, that's all about exactly that kind of unity yeah. Right.
Yeah, it really was helpful.
Yeah.
Did you study with Pearls?
I studied with Laura Pearls. That's Fritz Pearls' wife.
Yeah.
She was my trainer.
Oh, wow.
and my personal therapist.
I would agree with those techniques of Gestalt and EFT that they really work. But I would say in the moment, if I feel like I'm between a rock and a hard place, you know, I call it torture, where your emotions are very strong and you're not getting what you want. And I was just thinking back on a couple of situations where it felt like the energy in my body just went up and down really strong. And I had to say to myself, what is good for me right now? What do I want right now? And it would result in me just almost making a proclamation. I need this. And doesn't mean I'm going to get it, but this is what I need for my life to be whole. And And then later, I would explore through these techniques where that inability, I guess, to bend was in myself. But there's times where you can't give up yourself.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Am I making sense there?
Yeah, you are. And
Yes.
just, I want to just respond to that
Right.
in terms of, I'll shut up in a second, but just in terms of what the model we've been talking about a little bit, it sounds like your conscious part had to invite your other part to speak up for you.
Yeah,
Is that
because
right?
I would just wanted to go along and be
Yeah.
taken care of,
Yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah, but
Yeah.
it
So
wasn't
there's
working.
that dialogue. There's that internal, a rich internal dialogue that worked for you and that got you to find something that felt true and solid, and then to speak it to yourself. Cool.
Right, that there was something beyond the emotion
Mm-hmm.
that was emotion. It was a
Mhm.
different kind of heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A knowing sounds
Yeah,
like a deeper knowing.
Well, you know, as you get older, you remember all the times you gave yourself up and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So you can't keep doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so that's your PFC, having a nurturing and protective and parental, if you want to call it that, relationship to your emotional self, and saying, yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not working.
Mhm.
But it's doing it in service of the emotional self. It's not saying, cut that out, you idiot. You know, why don't you stop giving yourself away and then do this? Right?
Yeah.
It's a loving internal dialogue. There's a technique which we could do a practicing of, an internal dialogue thing, where you would have it's chair work essentially, right? Which will be familiar to some of you, right? And so if you have two parts of you, you can put them in two chairs, and so for me, one part of it could be the part that says, God damn it, Bob, you want to do this and you keep procrastinating. Why don't you just do it? You know, and then another part of me that goes like, oh, don't be mean to me. I just want to be, and stop bullying me. And so, and that dialogue can be completely polarized, but there's some tricks to that dialogue. If you talk, let's say you're talking to your judgmental self, right? And let's call it your super ego, right? And your super ego is
your
giving
inner
you
critic.
your critic. Okay, your inner critic is giving you a really, really hard time. And so in responding, so if you say to that critic, the critic says, oh, you're always procrastinating. You say, no, I'm not. I don't procrastinate. You'll find yourself not taking good care of yourself, because the critic's right. He's got a point there, right? He or she. So what the way that works is to say, you're right. I do procrastinate a lot. It's because I have a lot of fear. But you know what? And you may be right, but the way you're talking to me right now is not helpful. The way, it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. The way you're talking to me right now is not helpful. Could you find another way to say that? So admitting the part that the critic has some point, but training your critic to be a supportive and caring and loving counselor or advisor rather than a nasty critic. And so you can play that out in Gestalt, some kinds of therapy. When you'd be sitting in one chair, and you're being the critic. It'd be two chairs, and you're being the critic and saying, stop it and cut that out. And then at some point you'll switch chairs, and you'll have that dialogue, and the therapist will help you notice when all of a sudden might say, I think really what you just started agreeing here. Maybe you need to. Why don't you switch chairs? And what you end up with is a dialogue where the two sides are not that different. Where they both agree that you procrastinate a lot, and there's good reason for that, and you don't always procrastinate, and you do useful things, whatever it is. So training up your internal critic through a positive dialogue is a cool thing to do, and if people want, we could work on that.
Yeah, one example I have from my own life. And this was long ago, so I can't quite remember what triggered my feelings of abandonment. But I was on the subway, of all things. I was not in a therapy session. I was in a subway and I had these strong feelings of abandonment. And out of, I don't know, I guess, a reservoir of being in therapy, an older part of me said, hey, I'm now this age. I will take care of you. And it was my older self that said to that abandoned child, it's okay, I can take care of you. I've got the skills to take care of you. And it was really a very important moment for me because it just was a parts dialogue, but it went in a way that was very, very integrative. Meant a lot to me at the time.
That kind of like integrating the earlier person with the older person and making them one again.
Yeah, I would think that there was an integrating process that went on. I can't quite describe what it was, you know, how it worked, but it really made a huge difference and I never forgot it.
Pretty powerful.
So in those mentor roles, we often, it's not bad, but we often put that on or get that from someone else, which is a good start. And then at some point when we realized, maybe I could be my own, I could be my own mentor. Yeah.
I was in Gestalt therapy training at that time, so I had that background.
Yeah.
When this happened spontaneously in a subway. That was a long time ago, decades and decades ago.
Somebody once told me that grace comes, but more so if you prepare yourself. So the therapy sessions were preparing you and then bing.
Yeah, I think so.
Byproduct.
It's like a good backhand.
Yeah, I guess.
That's a pretty primitive analogy.
Tell us more about the backhand.
Oh, well, you're more likely to hit a beautiful backhand if you've been practicing how to do it. And if you've watched other people do it.
But there's something about that occurs to me, which is some people try to dredge up their whole past, but what I found is that things come up when they're ready. For you to, I mean, dreams happen when is that true? I mean, it's just something I've come to believe, that I don't have to be intellectual about my work.
I think it is.
You've got to really.
Go ahead, Sean.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say that's actually it's reflective of what Borg said, and also what Nina talked about in doing your painting or doing the quilting, and then there's as if there's this internal thing going on, and when it's ready, it comes to you, whether it's the piece, the next movement, or okay, I have the skills to deal with a trauma that's happened in the past, or I have the skills to deal with it, and it is a I think that idea of we're going to force it to the foreground when you don't have the preparation for it. It's like your backhand. It's real hard to hit a ball, and maybe you can do it once, but you need that preparation. And so understanding that it's all of that is helping us moving in the right direction. So but Borg, thank you for that description of your art and doing it. It's like I'm going, you get it. You understand what happens to me when doing art, and it is such a wonderful feeling when you it comes to you. That means that all these things happen while you're doing art, and then it comes to you what's going on underneath. So it's great.
I must leave now.
I wanted
to go.
Okay, thank you. I want to
I may or may not join next week. I'll be on the coast. I don't know what kind of reception I'll have.
It'd be great if you can. I mean, your participation is wonderful, and if you can't make it, you can't. Carol, I wanted to, because you put some of it as so your psyche knows when you're ready. And it's not the job of your conscious mind or your therapist to decide what you should be ready for. Because it's not useful until you are. And that's one thing, some people who are coaches and are trying to distinguish themselves from therapists will say things like, well, I'm interested in the future and not the past. Now, I don't want to dredge up the past. I'm interested in the future. And a reasonable therapist would say, I'm not interested in your past either until it is affecting you now. Right? So you don't dredge it up to dredge it up. You notice it when it's become an obstacle or a thing or a presence in your present life, and you're dealing with the present. You're dealing with your experience in the present, not some rule that says you should work on your past. And then it can be very useful to understand how because the past is showing itself in your present, and you're getting to learn something and have an opportunity to heal something. But that's only true if it's coming up to you now, and your life will tell you what comes up. One experience I have, I did this for 25 years or something like that, and with a lot of it with teenagers, or and often I'll run into an older person, a young person, but much older than I last saw them, and they'll say, "You were my therapist, weren't you?" And I say, "Oh yeah," and I'll get my memory triggered and go, "Yeah, yeah, sure." And they'll say, "I will never forget the thing you said to me that made such a big difference for me." And at that point, I take a breath because I know what's going to happen. And they'll tell me what I said that made such a big difference to me. And it will be something I absolutely know I did not and could not and would not have said. And it's hilarious because I know I go like, okay, here comes. And the point is that they put what they needed to hear in my mouth.
Yeah.
So whatever I said was useful enough to trigger whatever they translated as something quite different than I would have said, but in a way that meant something for them. So in some way, you're always the basic assumption that the unconscious of the client knows what they need to heal. The unconscious, at least, knows what they need to heal, seeks it out, and yeah, that's where the healing comes from.
Perfect. I need to get going, but this has been great. Thanks so much, Bob, and everybody there. I'm really learning from all of you. See you next week.
Thanks for your additions. All right. So go ahead, Nina.
How does a person approach somebody? I'm thinking about a close friend who is a narcissist and who insists totally on the here and now and future. But it's obvious that their very difficult past affects them seriously. I don't know how to talk to that person.
Well, that's so we're a little over time. I'm happy to talk with you a little bit about that if you want, but I think we should release whoever wants to be released.
Oh,
I'm going to leave.
All right, Borg. Thanks for being here.
See you next week.
All right. Bye-bye, Terry.
Bye.
So I think, Nina, nobody wants to feel that someone else sees through them and understands them better than they understand themselves. That's and so most everyone, and especially if a high degree of narcissist, will put up a defense against that. So so it's kind of I think you can just say what's difficult for you now, and what you would need or like now to feel that things were working better. And in working on that, it may be that they at some point they say, well, in my family, if you didn't, I'm making this up, in my family, if you didn't shout louder than the other person, you were dead meat, or whatever it is. In my family, if you let anybody see your imperfections, they would be used against you ruthlessly. You know,
Yes,
so
it was someone who grew up with 11 brothers and sisters.
yeah, or
So it probably
so
didn't get much attention.
yeah. So I think you can have your own analysis in your mind, but and that may help you in being skillful in talking to the person, but you're not going to plunk your analysis of the person on them and expect them to benefit from it or use it in a useful way, I don't think. So it's more if you're asking for what you want from them and letting them know what's sometimes difficult for them in the present now, that may bring you someplace or not. And you may find that the person, but you may also find that the person simply is not capable or interested in doing that. And then that's, you can't, what is it? Can't get blood from a stone or whatever it is,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay, thank you.
Were
I
you
mean, that's
going
why
to
people
meet
are
on?
afraid of therapists. People are afraid that the therapist has sort of X-ray vision, right? And
Right. Oh, I don't need a therapist. Yeah.
yeah, and they're
People who
figuring you
say that.
out, knowing things about you because they're trained therapists that you don't know, and you're sort of undressed, and nobody really likes that experience, I don't think, You were saying something, Carolyn?
Do you think that people will meet this Saturday?
So I don't know.
There's a protest downtown for
Oh,
Roe
there is?
versus Wade, I think, at
Oh,
noon.
good.
Yeah, there's going to be a protest downtown.
On
Yeah.
Saturday. Or
I
you
think it's at noon.
at noon, huh? So I think what I've done is decide that I've copped out on organizing it, and I'll leave it to people to organize. And then well, let me ask you. You were both there. This kind of a question of what my role is at them. We could just be friends meeting and chatting, or I could offer something, and I'm happy to do either one actually. Um, or in some sense, if people have been brought together by the course, then I don't know what how
Well,
did
I
it work?
like it when you,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I like it when you suggest a question or an exercise, and then we freely talk.
Mhm.
our
Me too.
experience with it. It gives some direction instead of just
Yeah.
chit chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to be our therapist. You can be
Oh,
our
and the other
friend.
thing, I don't remotely think I'm your therapist, by the way.
Okay.
Um, but so did I was I too attached to having some I had some notes and stuff. Did I seem too attached to what I wanted to present or not last time?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Not for me.
Not for
I
you.
kind of
Okay.
forget about it.
Okay.
I don't
All right.
react to that.
Okay. So, all
Because I
right.
know as soon as you're done, we get to talk.
All right. So so I would like to participate, but I don't think I want to put it together. Um,
Mhm.
and if I'm told what's been put together and where, then I will show up if I can and probably can. Does that make sense? Is it on your end? Or if you get
I
something
don't,
together, you could give me some choices or something. I don't know.
mhm. I don't know if it's the best weekend for me, but we'll
So
see.
the other thing is,
I'll be,
as far as I'm concerned, would be my wishes if I was organizing it. One is it doesn't have to be the weekend for me. And I don't like, I mean, Sean particularly mentioned she'd like to be at it and can't if it's on the weekend. So it could be at another time. And if I'm there, I prefer it to be outdoors unless it's raining. So what we could do that thing of,
Mhm.
rain, depending on the weather, and I could or someone could reserve the room as a backup. They're okay with that as long as if we're not using it, they're okay with that. Um, and people could just tell me and I could call them, or I could hand their phone number, and this just the Washington Bank, and you just say, I'd like to reserve a room. I have the numbers and the information for that. I could hand over to someone, or you could ask me to do it. Either way.
And which park is easier to park?
Well,
Saturday, it's so difficult to park in Whitfield Park.
Or Sunday.
yeah.
But if Sean wants to come, it would be a different day.
Yeah.
We didn't have any trouble parking, did we?
No,
Yeah.
I think I was afraid of that, but I don't find it. I think one can park. That's a pretty big parking area, and I also think that if those tables that we were at uh, are taken, there's a lot of good places near there. But if I was leading an experiential thing at all, then I would probably do some. What we did last time, Nina, was talk to the trees. More or less, related to something in the world. So that's my attachment. Why I would much prefer that to just a meeting room, if it's not raining. So.
Well, it's supposed to be sunny Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
except if people are protesting, then I don't know.
No, I think we would. We probably don't want to sit out the protest if it's happening at that time. We might want. Anyway, this is the point where I'm going to leave it to you guys, and I know that
Make it at 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, that might be better than 3.
so why
I'm
don't
gonna
you
have to
why don't
leave
you one of you,
tomorrow.
use one of my invites, just because it has everybody's address on it, and just do reply all and start a chain discussing how you'd like it to happen. You know what I'm talking about? Is that
Okay.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the addresses.
I have to go. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Nina, if you just take one of the messages that has everybody's address on it already, right? So if you go to my invite, one of my invites, and push reply all, and then say whatever you want to say, that will go to everybody.
I mean, just hit reply? No,
No, see,
I don't know how to do that.
oh, well, it's pretty simple. So you're I'll help you with that. Are you in your email?
Yeah,
Okay, go to the invitation to this group. Either yesterday's heads up or today's thing. The thing you clicked to get here.
okay, well, wait, can I put that on top of the us on the screen?
You talking about my screen? No, you're just going to your computer. Nothing to do with my screen.
But will I lose this
Oh,
screen?
no. If you push Google or whatever, do you use Google?
Firefox.
Okay, if you push Firefox, it'll come up, it'll cover this screen, but this screen will be behind it. And just go to your email. Just do whatever you do to go to your email, and it'll come up in front of this screen probably.
Oh, the email. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. So we're still on,
okay.
but for you may
Okay,
have a screen in front. Okay, so you're in your email. Look at my email that I sent saying.
I'm looking at your email.
Okay, now if you push reply all, or if you push reply, if you just push reply, it'll give you a choice between reply or reply all.
Reply all. I don't have everybody's address on here.
No, I'm saying you're adding this to a chain that I started.
Oh, okay.
And that chain has everybody's address on it. Yeah. So if you push reply all.
Oh, okay. It says subject Ray class this Thursday. So that would have everybody's address because it's not on the email. The addresses aren't on the email.
I'm sorry.
I don't understand.
Okay, you can get this. It's not that hard. If I can get it, you can. When you get that email, it is addressed to everyone in the group. My email is addressed to everyone in the group, but it doesn't show for you because I put it on the BTT or what.
Okay, so it says Ray class this Thursday would cover all the emails. But it doesn't show on the email, right?
I don't know what you're reading. What are you reading to me when you say? Read the email that you talk about.
I'm reading your email.
What does it say?
It says sent, May 3rd. I'm looking, I guess, at an older email.
That's all right, though. That'll work.
It says subject Ray class this Thursday. So that would cover everybody's email, but it doesn't appear on the email, on this
Yes,
email.
but would you go to the one that just happened? I sent one today and yesterday.
I couldn't find it. I ran in and I pulled this one up, and if I close it,
if you just go to your emails, it'll be a recent email.
Oh, good. I get 200 emails a day because I'm
Oh,
an
you
animal
do?
rights activist.
Oh my God, that's wonderful.
I mean,
Well, if
yeah,
you you have a search probably for belonging. If you put, because they're all addressed to, they all start with belonging to each other in the planet.
Oh, God. I don't know where it is. I'm trying to find your email. Was it yesterday that you?
I put one. I did one last night, and I did one today just before class.
Oh, you did one today. Okay, let's see here. I don't want to keep you on here forever.
That's fine. I'm all right. Oh my God, I'm still recording. Let me get rid of that.
I get emails from